welcome to another installment of Where Was God? Today we're going to take a look at the Battle of Ai. A lot of you know this story. You know it from the Bible, you heard it in church, you read this story and everything else, but there's one thing in this story that emphasizes a whole bunch of major points that we got to pay attention to. Number one, people look at the story of Ai and they know that Joshua made a decision on his own. He sent a whole bunch of people over there to fight against Ai, and they got their butts kicked. So we look at that story and say, you know what? We got to learn something from that story. Don't go out and fight any battle in life without directions from God. Otherwise, you're going to get your butt kicked. So we're hanging on to this promise and following this promise, but what about the other lessons this story has? It's for one thing, I'm seeing a whole bunch of people with all this war in Israel and all this other stuff jumping around in different sections of Revelation and the Old Testament saying, okay, we're going to take a little piece of this story out of here, we're going to take a little piece of this story out of this book, we're going to put them together, we're going to come up with our own story. But the story of the Battle of Ai teaches us an important lesson. If we don't read the entire story, there is no way we're going to see those lessons in life. Now, we all know when we make a mistake in life and we fail to learn the lesson, we're doomed to repeat that mistake. And we don't want to see this happening with our troops in the Middle East. Are we going to send troops over to Ukraine? What's happening with Ukraine? How come they can't get the job done? There's a lot of mistakes being made. A lot of mistakes. The economy, the open border, we're having people protesting in the streets to support Hamas. I mean, how did all these mistakes happen? We got to look at the entire story. The same thing when we start seeing people pull little bits and pieces out of different books in the Bible to explain what's happening in Israel. They are not reading the story in Revelation the way it was recorded. And that's what the Battle of Ai does. It explains that it's a long story written over a number of chapters, and unless we read the entire story, there is no way we're going to learn the lesson. So let's start taking a look at this Battle of Ai that's introduced in Joshua chapter 7. But Israel violated the instructions about the things set apart for the Lord. A man named Achan had stolen some of these dedicated things, so the Lord was very angry with the Israelites. Achan was the son of Carmi, the descendant of Zimri, son of Zerah, the tribe of Israel. Now we see this right here. This whole thing is explained later on in the story, but it goes right from this introduction to this chapter to Joshua sent out some of his men from Jericho to spy out the town of Ai, east of Bethel, near Beth Aven. When they returned, they told Joshua, there's no need for all of us to go up there. It won't take more than 2,000 or 3,000 men to attack Ai, since there are so few of them. Don't make all our people struggle to go there. Okay, we all know this story follows the fall of Jericho. We all know the story of the fall of Jericho. They had to walk around the city 7 days. And on the seventh day, they walked around it 7 times. And they blasted the horns, and they all shouted, and the walls fell down. And it was an easy victory for Israel. Why? Because they followed the instructions of God. So approximately 3,000 warriors were sent. But they were soundly defeated. The men of Ai chased the Israelites from the town gate as far as the quarries, and they killed about 36 who were retreating down the slope. The Israelites were paralyzed with fear at this turn of events, and their courage melted away. Oh, okay, they just defeated Jericho, one of the most fortified cities in the region, and they melted away from a town of less than 3,000 warriors. Why is that? Joshua and the elders of Israel tore their clothing in dismay, threw dust on their heads, and bowed down to the ground before the ark of the Lord until evening. Then Joshua cried out, "O sovereign Lord, why did you bring us across the Jordan River if you're going to let the Amorites kill us? If only we had been content to stay on the other side." Oh, okay. So there's Joshua, the leader of all the Israelites, more than 1 million people, and he's ready to give up. Why? Because of one single setback. "Lord, what can I say now that Israel has fled from its enemies? For when the Canaanites and all the other people living in the land hear about it, they will surround us and wipe your name off the face of the earth. And then what will happen to the honor of your great name?" So there you go. Joshua started making decisions on his own, and his mind ran away. He let the demons in, and the demons started influencing every thought in his head. But the Lord said to Joshua, "Get up. Why are you lying on your face like this?" And I want to stop right here because this really brings us back to a part of the story in a previous chapter. So we're gonna go back. You see, this word but what? But that's telling us that if we plan on understanding this story, we got to go back and see what the but is for. What's in the previous chapter? And that begins with, "Now the gates of Jericho were tightly shut because the people were afraid of the Israelites." You see, in this previous chapter, the people were afraid of the Israelites. Now Israel is afraid of all the people. No one was allowed to go in or out. But the Lord said to Joshua, "I have given you Jericho, its king, and all its strong warriors." So we see, based on this, there's this whole, give the orders, march around the town with your armed men, will lead the way in front of the ark of the Lord. So there's all these instructions they had to follow. And what happened? They completely destroyed everything in it with their swords, men and women, young and old, cattle, sheep, goats, and donkeys. Meanwhile, Joshua said to the two spies, "Keep your promise, go to the prostitute's house and bring her out along with all her family." Well, okay, there's this little thing about Rahab in here that we got to pay attention to too. Why did the Lord use Rahab, a prostitute, as an ally? Wasn't there anybody else in Jericho that could be trusted? Not only did they save Rahab, her father, mother, brothers, and all her relatives who were with her. They moved her whole family to a safe place near the camp of Israel. So this one woman saved her entire family. A lesson learned. Does that bring your mind back to stories in the New Testament? But I want to go back and emphasize one point, about Joshua being on his knees or laying on the ground. Okay, when all the Amorite kings went west of the Jordan, and all the Canaanite kings who lived along the Mediterranean coast heard how the Lord had dried up the Jordan River so that the people of Israel could cross, they lost heart and were paralyzed with fear because of them. God didn't have to destroy anything. He didn't have to display any kind of military might or anything. What did he do? He dried up a river. Well, okay. Now, what about all those stories in Revelation that talk about drying up a river or something like that. Well, for some reason in Revelation, it kind of seems that drying up a river, the people just ignore it. They're not looking at it as, God at work. It doesn't strike fear in them. Now, how come? Okay, so you take these stories and you combine the stories. Okay, but first, before they invaded Jericho, Joshua had to circumcise the entire male population. Why? Well, if you look at circumcision, you kind of know where it is. God picked this really strange part of a man's body to show his covenant or his agreement between that man and himself. Why is that? Well, you got to go back and you got to read the whole story to find out why God chose that. Okay, and then there's other parts of the stories, and we combine the right stories, not just one sentence out of a story. We find out some amazing things. Now we get to the point to where when Joshua was near the town of Jericho, he looked up and saw a man standing in front of him with a sword in his hand. Joshua went up to him and demanded, "Are you friend or foe?" Well, Joshua was pretty bold because in my imagination, this guy was like, a little wimpy guy going up to Hulk Hogan or something, Neither one, he replied. "I am the commander of the Lord's army." At this, Joshua fell on his face to the ground in reverence. "I am at your command," Joshua said. "What do you want your servant to do?" The commander of the Lord's army replied, "Take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy." And Joshua did as he was told. Now right here, when you see take off your sandals, what does that bring us to? Who else took off their sandals? Moses at the burning bush where this all began. They needed someone to organize the Israelites to take them out of slavery in Egypt. And here they are, out of slavery, wandering around the desert for 40 years. The entire generation that left Egypt, except for a chosen few. That's another important part of the story. And here we are taking off the sandals again. And this time preparing for battle. And when you start putting these points together, they start making more and more sense. That is one of the main themes of this battle of AI that we got to pay attention to, is we got to look at the entire story. So what happened with AI? Well, there's this other story in between to where, Achan took some stuff. Instead of, with Jericho, everything was supposed to be dedicated to the Lord. All the animals, all the gold, all the silver, all the iron, everything. But what did Achan do? Among the plunder, I saw a beautiful robe from Babylon. This is from Babylon. Ties another story together. 200 silver coins and a bar of gold weighing more than a pound. I wanted them so much that I took them. They were hidden in the ground beneath my tent, with the silver buried deeper than the rest. Okay, so one guy gets greedy and the entire nation of Israel suffers. Why is that? Then Joshua said to Achan, "Why have you brought trouble on us?" Just one person can ruin the whole thing. "The Lord will now bring trouble on you." And all the Israelites stoned Achan and his family and burned their bodies. They piled a heap of stones on Achan, which remains to this day. That is why the place was called the Valley of Trouble ever since. So the Lord was no longer angry. You see how one person ruined the whole thing. cost the lives of 36 men when he went up against Ai. So not only did Achan have to suffer the penalty, his entire family, but after that, the entire curse was lifted. So we got to pay attention to these things. Just one minor little thing can, ruin the whole thing. Then, which means we have to read the previous story before we can understand this. And now that we read the whole story behind it and know that one person can ruin it for the whole thing. The Lord said to Joshua, "Do not be afraid or discouraged. Take all your fighting men, and attack Ai, for I have given you the king of Ai, his people, and his town." The Lord doesn't mess around. There's, 1,000,000 fighting men in Israel? You're going to put up 1,000,000 to 3,000? Okay. You will destroy them as you have destroyed Jericho and its king. But this time you may keep the plunder and the livestock for yourselves. You see, that was a test of giving everything to God. And if you pass that test, there's more to come. Set an ambush behind the town. So Joshua and all the fighting men set out to attack Ai. Joshua chose 30,000, now he's going to outnumber them 10 to 1, of his best warriors and sent them out at night with the orders to hide in ambush close behind the town to be ready for action. When our main army attacks the men of Ai, come out to fight as you did before, and we will run away from them. Now, this is, imagine, this huge army coming down on a town with 3,000 men to defend it. And these guys got the guts to leave the safety of the city to go out and chase them. That's how mentally warped these people of Ai were. Aren't we seeing a whole lot of mentally warped people today? But we gotta, wait for God to give the command. We will let them chase us until we have drawn them away from the town, for they will say, the Israelites are running away from us as they did before. Then, while they are running away from them, you will jump up from your ambush and take possession of the town, for the Lord your God will give it to you. See, this is it. When you follow instructions, and there's a whole series of instructions related in this story, you go back, it probably covers 10 chapters. So, what does that teach us? We have to know how one story led into another, and what the relationship is. So, Revelation is written the exact same way. Go through Revelation from chapter 14 or chapter 16. Actually, start at chapter 16. If you can get past chapter 13, you're doing okay. You read it like a story. One story builds on another to the next event, to the next event, to the next event. And you'll see exactly how the Lord has planned all of this stuff out. So, if you got any questions, leave a comment. If you like it, leave a like. Share it. Let's get this out. Because if we can share this story with the people in charge that are trying to get us involved in a war in Israel, getting us involved in a war in Ukraine, if they knew how to pray, if Biden or anyone on his staff knew how to pray, we wouldn't be in this position. So if there's one story we can get out to them, wouldn't it be this story? Okay, you be the judge. Leave a comment. Share this. let's try to get this out in front of the people that are actually, well, okay, let's face it, Congress wants to start a war because they are really good at making money off of wars. That goes without saying. But, that was covered in the story of the Battle of Ai because that one guy, Achan, was greedy. Need I explain anything more? Now think about it, pray about it, because there's a lot more details in this story that I didn't even cover. I could do a dozen videos on just the Battle of Ai with all the lessons that battle teaches us that we need today. But let's hang on to the one that every patriot understands, that we're not moving anywhere unless we get direct orders from God. And boy, that's one lesson we got to share with the radical left. Have a great day.